back, everyone. So we're here in New York sitting down with Trevor Loudon, author, filmmaker, and Epoch Times contributor, talking about the current state of the elections in the United States and what they represent. So Trevor, it's a real pleasure having you here.
Most welcome, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Now, first off, I'm curious. You've been watching these communist socialist groups for more than 30 years. You've watched how they've gotten involved in the political systems. You've watched how they've been involved very recently in the riots, different movements in the U.S., and you've, of course, watched what their agendas are. How do you see these agendas playing out in the current time? What does this really represent?
Well, you have a network of pro-Chinese communist parties in this country. Communist Party USA, Liberation Road, Freedom Road Socialist Organization. All of them helped with the propaganda over the COVID. The Chinese line was force shutdowns, shut down everything. All of them were involved in promoting that and also saying how wonderful China was because China's handling it so well. So bringing down America, promoting the Chinese line. Then they were all involved in promoting the massive wave of rioting that took part in this country. That was specifically the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, which instigated the rioting and organized it in cities like Milwaukee, Kenosha, cities in Florida, Houston, Dallas, Salt Lake City, etc., and Liberation Road, which is the group behind Black Lives Matter, which did organize most of the riots and protests in other cities. Communist Party USA joined in, other groups joined in, but those two pro-Chinese communist groups were the main instigators. And then, to top it all off, you have the same pro-Chinese communist parties running big voter registration drives in targeted states, the key swing states, signing up hundreds of thousands of low propensity voters, mainly in the minority communities, so they could lift the Democrat vote total enough to either win outright or lift it up enough where a little bit of fraud on top wouldn't be noticed. So the Chinese, through their communist networks in this country, were able to promote the COVID propaganda. They were able to burn American cities all across the country and bring the country to the point of chaos. And then they were able to target and specifically influence key elections across the country. They openly claim credit for swinging the election in 6 key states for Biden. They openly claim credit for this.
Now, Trevor, what evidence can we show people when it comes to these groups having been involved in the elections and having ties to China?
Well, if you go through the publications of groups like Freedom Road Socialist Organization and Liberation Road, they openly talk of their ties to China. It's there. They have big posters of Mao. They quote Communist China. They send delegations to China. They talk about their support for China. But the general public doesn't see this. But the evidence I'm talking about is monitoring. If you monitor their communications, their Zoom networks, their Zoom conferences, their internal publications, which I have some access to, there you will find much more evidence of open communication with the Chinese consulate, for instance, in San Francisco, openly working with the Chinese officials in New York. The Boston communists work with the New York communists on that. So the evidence is there if you dig for it. They're much more open than you think they might be. It's really a matter of connecting the dots. But because there is no media scrutiny on these communist groups, and the FBI hasn't even gone after them for years, they are a lot more open than maybe it's wise for them to be. You read their publications, they talk about organizing the riots, they admit they organized the riots, they take credit for organizing the riots, they openly talk about how China is leading the world in dealing with the COVID. They openly propagandize for increased shutdowns in this country. They use their power in the unions to keep teachers away from schools, to shut down businesses who try to open. And then if you look at the same people involved in the key voter registration organisations in this country, and then you monitor their communications where they boast about flipping this state, they boast about the 8 million phone calls they made in this state, or the million doors they knocked in this state, and how we flipped Pennsylvania, and how we flipped Michigan, and how we flipped Wisconsin. They say it. All you have to do is connect what they're doing to communist China. So you just go to the places where they talk about their links with China, and then you connect the dots.
What is the agenda of these groups? If they were to get what they wanted, and of course you've been studying these groups for 30 years, if they were to get what they wanted, what would that be?
Basically what you have in China now, communism. They want communism. And some of them believe in the old style communism of the Soviet bloc. Some of them it's more the Chinese style communism. But they all want some variation of the communist parties completely controlling the United States of America, where everything is under their control, where their opposition is completely suppressed, where people are in re-education camps, or death camps if the re-education camps don't work. They want exactly what the communists that took over Cuba want, the communists that took over China want, every dictatorship around the world, where they came after their enemies, they imprisoned their enemies, they killed their enemies, and they tried to build a new society out of the ashes. That's what they want. They have never given up that dream. So these groups that were behind Black Lives Matter, that is their goal. If you look at their website, they talk about abolishing the family. They talk about a new society. They talk about socialism. You know, their ideal world is where there are no families. The only family is the state, where we all live in this collective whole. There are no real individuals. All wealth is centrally controlled. And you are just a cog in the machine. It's the beehive society of Plato. You know, you got the ruling class, the soldier class, and everybody else are drones. Everybody else is just part of the machine. And most of these communists want to be part of that ruling class. That's what they want, and they want to have a soldier class to keep all of us in line for eternity.
I think it'd be interesting to talk about, I want to hear your ideas on what America represents and what is really at stake with this election.
Well, I think the whole American idea is at stake. You know, I think the idea that as America will either go on from this election and be strengthened and gather steam and bring us to a much greater future, or it will be lost and we'll be heading into a very deep period of darkness, and who knows how long that'll last, and that doesn't bear thinking about. So what is the American idea? You know, the key thing about America is that on all of human history, we've been run by tyrants and oligarchs. Small groups of people have run virtually every country, and their word would be law. And you saw this in the so-called divine right of kings, where the king would say, I speak to God, and he commands me that you must give me 40% of your income every year. You must give me your every third son for my army, every fourth daughter for my court. And the king and God tells me this, and if you disobey me, you're disobeying God. And it always happened to be that God agreed with the king. Well, the American Republic was founded on a very different idea, that man's rights come directly from God. You have a right to liberty. You have a right to defend yourself. You have a right to speak. You have a right to worship as you see fit. They are God-given rights. And the only reason you have a government is to protect those rights. That was a total revolution in world history. That was the first time this had ever been really put into practice. And that's what made America great. That certainty that your rights came from God, that the rule of law that you could rely on fair laws to protect your property, to protect your freedom of speech. That gave Americans the certainty to go out and create great businesses, to set up great schools, to create churches, to create hospitals, to create a great culture. All of that happened because Americans were free, and that freedom was guaranteed by law and granted by God. But that's a very rare thing in world history. But look what it gave us. Look at what Americans have today, the prosperity, the freedom that they have, and look at the great good that America has done around the world because of it. Well, all that hangs in the balance right now. If we lose that, we become just another dictatorship. Like the whole world has been run for thousands of years. The government will own everything. The government will dictate everything. Everything will be determined by those very few people who control the government. All religious liberty will be gone. All freedom of speech and freedom of conscience will be gone. All security of property will be gone. All right to defend yourself from the state will be gone. The state will be God. And if the state can give you rights, it can take them away too. That is the idea that hangs in the balance right now. Are your freedoms given to you by God? Are they intrinsic within you as a human being? Do you have a right to liberty, to the pursuit of happiness, to freedom of conscience? Or do you belong to the state? Do you belong to the rulers of this world? That's what we have to choose. And that's what's at stake in this election.
You know, Trevor, one way I've been portraying this and explaining it, I should say, is a battle between freedom and socialism. And this isn't a Trump and Biden thing. This isn't a Republican and Democrat thing. This is, in my eyes, the clash of two different interpretations of the nature of government, as you mentioned, and the purpose of government, and of the extent to which people should be ruled, coming to a head that has been going on since the late 1700s, essentially, with the start of the American idea. And what we're up against is really this. Alongside the American Revolution was the French Revolution, which was the spark of the world socialist movements. And these two ideas have been battling with each other for well over a couple hundred years now. How do you see, I guess, first off, we talked about the American idea, how do you see socialism being reflected in this election?
Already you have Black Lives Matter trying to tell President Biden who he should put in his cabinet. So you have, this is nothing to, see, in the free society you're governed by laws that are agreed to, laws that protect your rights, laws that govern how you go about your business. And really, the only laws are there to protect you, to stop you from hurting someone else. That's it. In a socialist society, all law is there to protect the state. And if the state wants to change those laws at a whim, the state can do that because the state is the ultimate law. So you've got a system now where Biden is already talking about getting rid of your immigration law. He's talking about legalizing 11, 12, 20 million illegal immigrants. Why? Because he knows they're going to vote majority Democrat. He's talking about enacting this massive Green New Deal where everything will be owned by the state, where every worker will be forced into a union, where your whole economy will be reoriented, where fossil fuels will be a thing of the past, meaning the end of air travel, meaning the end of any prosperity in this country. So you're seeing already shaping a situation where totalitarians are going to be given complete control over every aspect of your life. It's right there in front of us. Socialized healthcare, where the government controls every aspect of your healthcare from birth to death. Now you might think that sounds great, but what if the government doesn't like you? What if you don't like the government? What if you write some letters criticizing the government or try and organize a rally, and then your little daughter gets sick with leukemia? What if the government decides, well, you don't really deserve to have your daughter treated by the state because you're an enemy of the state? That is the kind of thing that is looming on our horizon right now. And if people think that's a little bit of an exaggeration, go and live in Cuba for a little while. Go and live in North Korea, because what they're experiencing in those countries now is what is headed this way if things go wrong in this country.
Now, Trevor, if we look at the global environment right now, we have the Chinese Communist Party, we still have Russia, we have Iran, we have North Korea, we have Cuba. We have socialist, very far-left governments in control of many Western countries. And the United States represents a very different system, which under Trump has had an effect of a very interesting cultural change in the world to some extent. The trajectory of that, to be honest, I thought was something that was going to change the world. But now we're seeing that Biden does, of course, with Kamala Harris, does represent more of the socialist ideas that these other governments believe in. And if you look at Harris herself, even further left than some of them. If we look at the situation right now, what happens with these governments and the nature of socialism in the world if America were to go along with it as well?
Well, see, every socialist country in the world has always hated America because America is this bastion of freedom and prosperity. It's a place people want to come to so they can make money, they can have a good future, they can have freedom, they can enjoy the fruits of prosperity. And all of these socialist countries have been embarrassed by America because they put in these enlightened policies that they think that they say are going to give freedom to, they're going to make everybody so much better off, and it always results in misery. And then they look at America, who follows the opposite philosophy, and everybody's doing well. So this is embarrassing to them. So this shows them up. It makes a lie of what they're trying to achieve. So really, they just have to get rid of America, because then there is no comparison. Then the state rules supreme. So look, if America should go down and fall into socialism, we will go into a downward spiral that will end I don't know where, because there'll be nowhere to run to. There'll be no way to share good ideas. There'll be complete control of ideas and the media by every government in the world. They'll all be following the same collectivist philosophy to some degree or another. And as that ruins their economies and people get impoverished, they'll get angry. And to suppress that anger, there'll have to be deeper totalitarianism. There'll have to be deeper control by the state. And that will lead to even more poverty and more anger. And that will lead to even more repression. And to the point there is no wealth. And to the point where everything just collapses. But you imagine the human misery that we will go through to get to that point. Imagine the death and destruction. And it's all completely unnecessary. If America survives and America can re-establish its constitution, you're going to see a massive discrediting of all these left-wing governments around the world. You're going to see people saying, yeah, look, America recovered. We can do that too. Let's get rid of our dictators. Let's have more freedom here. Let's be more like America. And you'll see more prosperity, more freedom, and an upwardly increasing spiral around the world. That great, what you were thinking of, Josh, that restoring America can lead to the restoration of liberty all over the world. It can lead to greater prosperity, more freedom, which will lead to more prosperity and more freedom. It's an upward spiral. But if we lose America, the spiral is downward, and there's no one to pull us out of it. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It just, evil begets more evil. But if we recover this country, good begets more good, and we can have a great flowering, a great awakening across the world. As I've said many times, the greatest evil on the planet right now is the Communist Party of China. You imagine if we can isolate the Communist Party of China, expose their criminality to the world, so their own people take them down. You imagine what will happen then when China is free. That will encourage every country in the world to seek more freedom. So we're at one of those real pivotal periods of time when if we make a mistake, if we lose this, the consequences are horrendous. But if we keep the faith and keep disciplined and strong and focused and keep fighting for freedom, the opportunities are unlimited. The potential is huge. We can have a flowering of human civilization like we've never seen before. It's that stark. The difference is that stark.
Hey, Trevor, it's a real pleasure having you on Crossroads. Thank you.
Great to be here, Josh. It was a real pleasure for me too.